Hey, what's going on guys, Khraze here, welcome back to some more Biomutant guides and gameplay. Today we're gonna take a look at some of the biggest tips and tricks that you need to know if you want to make the most out of the game. Some of these, I learned them along the way, some of them I kinda wish that I knew earlier because there are definitely a few of them in here that would have saved me a lot of headaches. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Right off the bat, let's begin with a few combat tricks that will definitely help you out, especially the melee combat block and launch up into the air. So the way this works is pretty simple. When you see an enemy incoming attack, you will notice that there is a white comic book effect over their head. If you press the block button at the correct time right before that enemy lands its attack on you, you're gonna be able to both block that damage fully and completely stagger it momentarily. Once that is done, quickly follow up with a quick melee attack and then another press of the block button, which in this case would be LB on the controller. Doing this will launch the enemy up into the air, where you can quickly follow up with a chain of melee attacks that will be super devastating and will take down almost any enemy in just that full combo. This also works, by the way, against bigger brutes and mini bosses. You can block their incoming attacks, stagger them, and in this case follow up with a series of melee jabs. In the case of the bigger brutes, you don't have to worry about pressing the block button the second time. Just quickly follow up with the melee attacks and eventually your character will jump over their head, where you will continue a similar sequence of attacks that will deal super high damage. Moving on to number 2, let's talk about your Super Wong Fu, which is kind of like an ultimate skill to be in, which opens up 4 different types of new attacks. So what you need to do in this case is to pay attention to the special Wong Fu unlocks for every type of weapon in the game. It's usually the last 2 that you need to unlock with the perk points that you get by leveling up. If you cast 3 separate of these special Wong Fu abilities, you will fill those 3 separate outlines slightly to the left of your character. Once all 3 of those are filled, you're gonna be able to see the prompt coming up on your screen, and from that point on you can activate your Super Wong Fu state. In this case, you will gain 4 new different types of abilities. The first one will completely replace your melee chain, so if you just press square or your regular attack button, you're going to do this melee flurry that will stun the enemy for the entire duration while also deal high damage. The second one is going to be the ground stomp, which is essentially done by jumping once into the air and then quickly following up with a melee attack, case in which your character will reach really high up and then come back into the ground with a really high area of effect damage. The third one is what I like to call the max pain mode. So essentially, if you jump up into the air during Super Wong Fu and use your guns, you will enter a slow motion, really long by the way, in which you're going to be able to shoot your guns at a much faster rate, a lot more bullets, and deal a lot more damage as a result. But moving on to number 3, upgrading stuff, especially late game, is going to be pretty costly and it will start to do so pretty quickly. And you will need a ton of wood, plastic, metal, and the other resources that you can see in the character inventory screen. Well, this is why I suggest right from the very beginning of the game to pay special attention to the big pillars that you see randomly scattered in the world. These are called resource totems and they will give you access to all of these resources right here. And you will need quite a ton of these eventually to make full gear upgrades, case in which I recommend to gather on these as early as possible. Also, on the same note, dismantling unused gear or duplicates is super useful and I definitely suggest you go ahead and do it very early on in the game. There doesn't seem to be a limit to the inventory size, so you might end up like me with hundreds of items and having to spend like 45 plus minutes to sort everything out. In this situation, I recommend to sort alphabetically and then start dismantling the gear that is the lowest level so you can keep the one that is the highest. Moving on to number 4, as I've said, exploration is going to be a huge part of the game, especially since most of the really important rewards and very powerful items are going to be behind some of these side objectives, missions, hidden bunkers, or other hidden areas. And I especially want to start things off with the civilians. Definitely pay attention to the civilians in outposts and even out in the wild, like for example the ones that tend to have exclamation marks over their head. Usually they either point you towards a quick quest of their own, which will give you quite a nice amount of XP, or in many situations information about special characters and NPCs that if you do some quests for them will give you really powerful ultimate or legendary items, like for example this one right here. But it doesn't just stop there, and this brings me to number 5. Once you have helped a civilian, go ahead and speak to them one more time. In this situation, you will notice that there is another option over there in the middle at the top where you can ask them for additional information or if they are hiding anything from you. Now this seems to be fully tied to your character's barter level, as well as if it is a good or an evil character. It seems that if you're playing on the light side, yeah, characters are more inclined to help you out with these secret locations. But if you manage to persuade them, which is going to be shown right there onto each of these options, you're going to be given a secret location, which is indicated by a question mark on the map. So it can be anything like, again, a new character or maybe a new zone that might hold a ton of cool secrets and maybe even an awesome reward at the end of it. Moving on to 6, one thing that I recommend also on the subject of exploration is to interact with as many of these yellow flag posts as you can on your journeys. Reason being is that even though early on you might think that they are unimportant, they actually act as fast travel points, so later on when you will unlock a ton of these side objectives and missions on the map, it's going to be super useful to just teleport to one of these really close to your next objective and complete it from there, instead of wasting time to travel long distances and having to do that all over again. So definitely pay attention to the yellow flag posts. Moving on to number 7, let's talk about these really important perk unlocks and the points needed to actually get them in the first place. So I'm going to go over these quickly because there are a number of them. The first one are your regular perk points that you get by just leveling up the regular old way, but you can also find these randomly in enemy outposts from these books that you can interact with, and they will give you one additional point on top. The second type of point are the bio points, and you get these from these random green biohazard containers, but there's also an additional way, which is going to be from these insect enemies that you usually encounter either in underground areas or in biohazard power plants. Finally, there's the psi points. This is what you use to unlock those psi abilities, and you unlock them usually from shrines. So whenever you're in an outpost or randomly out in the wild, look out for these because they will provide one of these points each. I will also mention that there are these bigger statues that can light up with a white kind of glow and sometimes with a darker kind of glow. In these situations, they will give you psi points, but they will affect your aura both in a negative or a positive kind of way. So if you interact with the light ones, obviously they will give you more light aura, while the darker ones give you the dark aura. So this is going to be important because, as you can see, some of these psi abilities will require a certain number of points into either darkness or light. Now, luckily enough, if you play the game enough, you're eventually going to get enough of these psi points to unlock all of these abilities, but pay attention to their requirement if you want to unlock them way earlier. Finally, there's the training equipment and the books. So training benches and weightlifting is also a minigame that is in Biomutant, and they will provide additional bonuses to your regular stats. So pay attention to these as well. They also count towards a certain side quest that I will not spoil in this video. But this brings us to the number 8 trick on the list, something that really helped me a lot to reach higher places when they were inaccessible, or just, you know, better at exploring and reaching high places, so that you can then use your glider, for example, to maybe scout the area ahead or maybe have a better time at traversing the environment. And early in the game, you're gonna be able to get the Jagme staff, which you get from the tribe with the same name. Now you can get this both if you join them or even if you don't join them but then conquer it with a different tribe. It doesn't really matter because you get it in both of these situations pretty much early on in the game. But what's most important about it is that if you hold that button while you're up in the air, if you hold that melee button up in the air, it's going to use it kind of like a glider slash helicopter for a couple of seconds. If you combine this with a double jump, you can essentially reach way higher locations than you could otherwise on your own. So it was definitely useful to, for example, jump over the water or over a ledge, and even more so to reach the next level in case it was inaccessible to me. And later on, once you unlock that helicopter backpack, by the way, that's gonna come up in a future future video really soon, you're going to be able to reach way higher even than this. So this is it with today's tips and tricks. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you want to see more Biomutant here on this channel, make sure you leave a like on this video, subscribe and activate that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one.